a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do change. Change.
Good afternoon and welcome to Spirit Cafe show. I am so delighted to be here with you. I'm Barbara Jean and this is my co-host.
Marg. So happy to
Marg.
be here. What an exciting day this is being.
Oh, it's going to be a good one for sure. And of course, my regular co-host Cheryl Rogers is away having a little vacation time, so she'll be back next week. Well, today I want to start with our land acknowledgement like we do every show. We are honored to be meeting on this land that many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people from across Turtle Island call home. We acknowledge and thank the original caretakers and knowledge keepers of this territory, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. We also give thanks to all other Indigenous peoples, recorded and unrecorded, who have shared responsibility for this territory. In honoring the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, which protects this territory, we accept our responsibility to peaceably share and care for the resources that surround us. We also acknowledge, as inhabitants of these lands, that inequality and discrimination continue to affect our BIPOC and 2S LGBTQ+ family. We therefore strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation. Recognizing our ultimate oneness and acknowledging our reality, past and present, we commit to moving forward in a spirit of mutual cooperation. We are one. Well, today our guest is the remarkable Rev Casey Taylor. They are the senior minister and co-founder of Spirit Uncensored. I love that name. A spiritual playground that highlights the value of choice, faith, and gratitude. Wow, who can't get behind that? Currently, Spirit Uncensored events include Spirit and Spirits, which is a monthly spiritual discussion held at a queer dive bar in Oklahoma City. I'd love to go there. They also serve as an administrative coordinator at the Center for Spiritual Living, a staff minister at United Life CSL, and a case manager at CSU Youth Services in Oklahoma City. Obviously, they have lots of spare time. That's right. Rev Casey has 4 jobs. CSU Youth Services is a low barrier LGBT plus affirming youth homeless shelter. And Rev Casey is supporting the launch of their pilot program for the state's first direct cash transfer program. In addition to their 4 jobs, Rev Casey also serves on the leadership team of the CSL Next Gen Retreat for people who are 18 to 35 ish. I wonder if I could squeak in. And they are president of the Coalition to End Poverty. This is one social activist we have in the house. Welcome, Rev KC.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So glad to have you. Now let's talk a little bit about Next Gen.
For sure.
I'm sort of old gen, so.
Next Gen is about, I would say it started about 6 years ago. Initially, the Centers for Spiritual Living had a young adult retreat, and there were a lot of reactions to that experience of being called the young adults. You know, it's as feeling, there are people like me, right now I'm 42, being 35 and considered a young adult. Like 35 doesn't really seem like it should qualify as that. And because 35-year-old ministers weren't being served in the organization in the way that we felt like Next Gen was a space, an opportunity, and a word, the next generation of leaders that can help support and create space. And as we talked about offline, when I graduated ministerial school around 35, I didn't have a clear idea of what my ministry was and felt like I'd never seen myself represented before. And having an opportunity to go to this Next Gen retreat gave me that perspective, and is where the name Spirit Uncensored was born. So this year we are hosting a retreat at Camp Cedar Ridge for the first time. And with your question about wonder if you can go sometime, our plan is next year we're doing a Spirit Uncensored retreat, because we'd really like Next Gen to really support being made by and made for people of that 18 to 35-ish range. And so because of that, for people like you who want that kind of uncensored spiritual experience, but to be able to give the next generation of leaders their own sacred space, we're going to do 2 different ones. So same time, October next year at Camp Cedar Ridge, we'll be doing an all ages Spirit Uncensored retreat that has that Next Gen vibe. And tickets for that will be going on sale soon, because our Next Gen retreat this year got sold out. So we've already had to prepare to sell tickets for next year for people who really wanted to go.
I think that's amazing. Now, I know Mark had a question for you, and I think the idea, I'm going to have to mark my calendar for next year. Mark, you had some questions when we were talking earlier.
Perhaps a road trip, Barbara.
Oh, there's an idea. There's an idea. How far a drive is it from Toronto to Oklahoma City?
Well, this is in
it's Cedar Ridge. Oh, yeah, that's a long drive.
It's like Portland, Oregon. I don't know how far. It seems closer than Oklahoma to Canada, I would think.
No, we're close to New York City.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely, you're right. That's a much longer drive.
So,
yeah,
a bucket list.
Yeah, we'll be flying down there.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. I must say that I'm coming in and out the bandwidth, I guess. So I feel like I need to catch up on because I missed what you were saying. So perhaps I'll be repeating with my question. What I want to know, Rev KC, do you like to be called Rev KC?
I sure do. KC's fine. Yeah.
Okay. What do you want me? What do you want us to know about you?
What do I want you all to know about me?
Yes.
Well, I was saying earlier that I had a hard time seeing myself in ministry, partly because I hadn't seen myself in ministry before. But the other side of it is that my experience of ministry has never been about my wanting to make a mark on the world. What Centers for Spiritual Living stands for, being a place for oneness, advocating for people to be who they are authentically. In my mind, there's not enough spaces in the world for that. There's not, the reason that we host a spiritual service in a bar is to really sort of take down these walls of recognizing that every location in the world is a spiritual center. It's the energy that you bring to it. It's not the building that has been built. And so I guess, I don't have a thing about me that I want to be out in the world, but I definitely want the world to see themselves as spiritual beings. And I guess if I were to answer your question, sorry, obviously that was really hard for me. To answer the question, it would be that being the change I wish to see in the world is very important to me. It is not something that I take lightly. And I lived a life of focusing on the change I wish to see, and recognize that it didn't serve me or anyone around me at all. That when I put my attention on living by example, it's a game changer. Not only do I become someone that I didn't even know I could be, but at the same time, I get to develop an understanding of love. I get to understand peace. I get to understand advocacy in ways in the world, in ways that I never had before. For instance, my decision to serve as a case manager at a youth shelter over the course of the last year or two, I had my own ideas of what created homelessness in the world. But once I got an opportunity to work with this population, work directly with this population, it really changed my insight and changed my perspective. And it's a lot easier to say, oh, the government should do this, oh, the city should do that. But to say I should go into a homeless shelter and learn about what kinds of how our culture is designed in a way that has a significant impact. I've learned so much just from going in and doing things myself than pointing fingers and saying this is how it should be. This is what everyone else should be doing. And when I find that when you spend that time on yourself, that energy is so much energy. There's no time to judge and criticize and blame anyone else. And I also learned from this experience that judging, blaming, and criticizing is not energy that serves me. I don't want you to judge and criticize. I need to practice that myself. So having an opportunity to recognize the value of being the change is my biggest thing, and it's where all my focus is.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. A lot of the work I do is with marginalized people who, are refugees, just they're people living with HIV. There's just a lot of othering, like lots of separation, right? Them and us. And I think that for me is where, even the joy show that I do on Fridays, it's just one you. And it's like each one of us is unique and special. Each one of us comes into this world with the little something, something we bring that no one else can bring, and sort of getting comfortable with that. And your story's similar to mine, because when I graduated ministry, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I'm not like everybody else. And then I saw Michael Beckwith do a talk, and he was just a madman on the stage. And I was like, oh, that's different than my teacher. Maybe I can just be me and figure that out and see what happens there. But it's hard to get out of the box. Like I've been trying to reconfigure the service and making it different and getting out of the box of we do this and we do this and we do this and we do this and we close. Ta-da!
You just
So-
bring up a question there, Barbara. Both ministers, I'm going against the grain here. Do you find it a different experience when you come into a room and people know that you're a reverend as opposed to a normal person?
Yeah, because we're definitely not normal, which is great. Normal, I think the better word might be mediocre. But anyway, that's another conversation. When I first joined the Toronto People with AIDS Foundation on their board of directors, everybody in the room, number one, I was the only white woman on the board. And I was the only person who they assumed was straight, and they saw the reverend. So we've got Latina, we've got Black, we've got Indigenous. Everybody's, I think pretty much everybody on the board is queer. And I'm like, they're looking at me like, what's she doing here? But they found out really, really quickly that I'm in 100%. And so, but it was a barrier in the beginning. So I don't always put Rev in front of my name. I've been a Reverend for 25 years. I'm a minister in both Unity and CSL. And I don't, I'm okay with people knowing it or not knowing it. And so I've taken it off of some places so that it isn't a wall that they have to get over, because they've decided that ministers are rigid religious blocks that can't be adjusted in any way. That was my experience when I first went into the board meeting with this group of people, which was 2 years ago now, and we're very, very close, all of us. But it was an interesting experience.
And for yourself, Rev Casey?
I feel like I have an opposite experience, and I think it's because I am not white and I am not hetero, and everyone knows it. And
Yeah.
I think that representation of being a non-white, not hetero minister is important. So I put
Absolutely.
reverend on everything,
Yeah.
and it I I think what happens is that people look to me for support, for guidance, for resources, and I'm not afraid of that.
Yeah.
And what's been nice about it, the this bar that is hosting the Spirit Uncensored each month, started from it was a safe place for me. I was new in town, and it was a place where when I walked in the door, everyone made me feel comfortable, made me feel welcome. And when I talked about my experience of ministry, people leaned in, people were interested. And I had just started as the assistant minister at the local CSL. And so letting people know that, hey, I'm here. You can come see me speak here once a month. I wanted people to know that. And a few people from the bar have I see them every once in a while on a Sunday, and we sort of overlap and find ways to play together. This center is hosting a drag show this Saturday in as a fundraiser for both Spirit Uncensored and that local center. And the people from the bar are the performers, and they're the ones who are come in. They show up for that. So I love it. I'm grateful for my experience of ministry, and I'm grateful for the fact that it always goes really well.
And it's interesting because when we look at different people, because I actually am bisexual, so still on the queer spectrum, but there's that assumption, right? And I think the fact that I'm white woman married to a man, that obviously I fit in a certain box. So I like that I'm much more like you than I am like what they think I am. So, but yeah, it's interesting how Rev means one thing in one group and something else in another. You're a way shower. I love that. I love that. So what about when you're working with people one on one, what are some of the barriers that people are facing now, whether around pronouns or being trans or the LGBTQ community? What seems to be a big part of your focus in ministry as we strive to get equity and inclusion?
Yeah, inclusivity is a big deal for me. And one-on-one sessions have been, definitely. I've had a few around people who are looking for insight around either their own individual experience or feeling as if their center isn't leading with inclusivity, and they want to initiate these changes in the center, and want a one-on-one session just so that they can walk into their center mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually prepared to take leadership and ownership of it. And what's interesting for me is being in Oklahoma City now. I've lived in Oklahoma City for 2 years. I'm from Chicago. I lived in LA, and now I'm in a place that is considered less progressive than the cities where I grew up or the cities that I'm used to. And I have managed in Oklahoma City to really only fallen into predominantly queer spaces. It's this bar that I talked about, Alibis. I have to give, since I mentioned them so much, Alibis is the name of the bar. CSU, the youth shelter where I work, not only are the majority of the youth identify as queer, but also the staff do as well. And the spiritual center that I'm a part of, there just happened to be a lot of the core leaders of the organization are queer also. So being in these spaces in this city where there's a lot of advocacy work happening on the city level, the All Ages Drag Show that I mentioned earlier is under fire. That when we started this drag show 2 years ago, we started it because our 17-year-old was 17 and there was nowhere to perform in Oklahoma City at that time. And so this is a great way to give the teen a space to perform, while also raising some money for the center. And the very next year, it became a proposed amendment for all ages drag shows to be felonies. And that hasn't been completed yet. There's been a lot of debate, and it hasn't gone into practice at this point. But certainly, our drag show is a political statement, and that was never the intention for it. And we've had to face some vandalism when we advertised the show. We are now hiring security, and we've had a community member that has fronted the cost for security each year, which has been, a godsend. And I'm grateful to be a part of communities where there are people stepping up, putting their money, their time, their action into this advocacy work in a community where we are not supported for being who we are.
Wow. Yeah, sometimes I just don't have any words for the ways in which we allow fear to drive. And that it's how do we begin to knock down the barriers? And I think you're making a really good point, Casey, with the idea of being in a bar. I remember a while ago going to a Legion Hall. I don't know if you have those in the US.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So was in a Legion Hall, and there was every age group there, a bunch of musicians and poets and stuff, and people were performing. And one guy wasn't there because he had been beaten half to death. He was in hospital, elderly fellow who was, part of the group. And they were talking about this man, and they were doing a whole sort of a show, a roast for him, just talking about how wonderful he was and how much they appreciated him and how sad they were that he'd been beaten half to death, actually. And about 3/4 of the way into the evening, the daughter went and brought the guy in, took him out of the hospital and brought him into the bar. And the love that was poured on him, just looking at his face, I swear to God, this was the very first time in his life he had ever experienced such an outpouring of just love and acceptance from the community. And it was really beautiful. Sort of, you look at where's spirit, wherever you are. It's like it's amazing what happens. So
Sure.
yeah, it's an interesting journey. What called you to ministry? Like, what got you rolling on going to school?
That's the best question ever, and one I have a really hard time answering, because it was certainly a series of events. It started simply with I was finished my first year of practitioner, and even that, what called me, I wasn't called to practitioner. It was just I had taken all of the prerequisites just based on my own education, and was qualified to go into the program. And I was married to somebody at the time that was interested in starting a spiritual app. And so the thought was, if I become a practitioner, I would bring some credibility to this app. And so I was doing it because I had the time. I had I felt like I would get something out of it. That's why I was taking all these other classes, is because I was getting a lot from it. And with practitioner class in particular, there was an assignment. Maybe at all this time, I had been trying to break into Hollywood. That's what I was doing in Los Angeles, was wanting to be the change I wish to see in the world through story. And I hadn't gotten anywhere. It'd been 2 years and I'd gotten nowhere. So the assignment in class was identify a condition in your life you'd like to change, and identify a belief you have that created that condition. And then it was, once that belief has been identified, identify the new belief that I'm leaning into and speak a prayer around it. And so in class, while I was reading that prayer, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket in the middle of the prayer, sat down at the desk and opened my phone to discover that the president of a production company asked me if I was still looking for a job. So that was this is working. I'm taking these classes because the homework assignments that I'm getting are creating a direct shift in my life. So I was doing it for me. I wasn't trying to be the change I wish to see in the world on anybody's pulpit, in anybody's stage. And with ministerial, my practitioner teacher said, this is going to be the last ministerial class that I teach. And I thought, well, of all of the ministers out there in the movement, this is someone that I'd really like to learn from. And so I'll just do it now, see what happens down the line. There were lots of staff ministers there. And so I thought maybe I'd be one of those people who did a reading on a Sunday. I didn't see myself doing a whole lot more than that. And it really came down to that job, that production company that reached out to me. They were not happy with the fact that I had to drive across town to get to practitioner class. So they were really not going to be happy with me having to do practitioner and minister class. And so I had this thought of, if the administrator job at the spiritual center opens up, then I will go to ministerial class. And lo and behold, the minister called me the very next day and said, hey, our administrator job is opening. Are you interested in it? And so I took that as my sign that I am meant to be a minister. And what's so funny, I'm sort of realizing this now, this year especially. This was, I went to ministerial school in like 2015, I believe is when I or 2014 maybe, because I think I've been a minister for 7 years. However that unfolds. I was in ministerial school for 2 years, not great at math on the fly. But the entire time I was in ministerial school, people always ask, what are you going to do when you're done? And saying, oh, I'm just going to be a staff minister and do the readings on some Sundays was not a reasonable response. And so I said that I was interested in young adult ministry specifically because people kept saying it to me. And I didn't like the idea of resigning myself to this one population to say, these are the only people I get to talk to. Okay, just because I'm 32 means that no one else wants, I don't have anything wise to say to somebody who's 75. I didn't like putting myself in that box, but I didn't have another answer. By the time 2 years was done and I was sitting in that panel and they said, what are you going to do? That's what I said was, I'm interested in young adult ministry. And the senior minister said, great, when are you going to start? And I said, I just picked a date 6 months from that moment and, started a young adult ministry. And that I mentioned before, it felt like my ministry kind of happened without me. I didn't know when I said in this panel that it would be expected of me to actually start doing it at my center. And when I started it, people showed up, and it started out with just teens initially, because that's who we had. And the minister's daughter was one of those people who was killed in a car accident a few years back. So I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to connect with her and for her to have served as my music director for my very first ministry. And so things just kind of kept going. The moment that I completed my ministerial program, my Hollywood career also took off. So I ended up as a TV executive at Viola Davis's production company. It was an incredible experience. I only left to focus on writing. I just connected with the person who had my job earlier this week, and she said, this is the best job I ever had. I don't understand why you left. And I said, I get it. So that's what I mean, is I was living my dream in all ways, but because I was in Hollywood and a minister, Rev Casey Taylor, on all things, people were saying, although it's Rev Karen Frost at the time, people were saying, what is this thing that you're doing? And centers across Southern California just started calling me and saying, hey, will you speak? So like my ministry just kind of kept going. I mentioned before we started that the person I was married to just built a website for me while I was sleeping. And so I just kind of kept rolling with it. And I trust, like, this is, that's how callings work, right? Like either you're on board and you're intentional about it, or it's happening without you and you got to jump on and figure it out as you go along.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a little commercial break here, and then we're going to be right back with more great conversation with Rev KC and, of course, my co-host, Mark. You're watching Spirit Cafe show. I'm Barbara Jean, and we're going to be back shortly. Don't go away.
See you in a moment.
I was made in the image. I was made in the image of love. I was made in the image. I was made in the image of love. Here and now I can see I was made beautifully. I was made in the image I was made in the image of love. Wish we'd all stop acting like we're strangers if we could see underneath. We are one family, and it don't matter where you come from. Every heart beats to the rhythm of one love. One love, one love. Every heart beats to the rhythm of one love. Every heart beats to the rhythm.
Blessings, everybody. My name is Jafon Seeley. Could you imagine what is actually possible when we start honoring and recognizing our inherent worth, realizing that we are that which is assisting and co-creating our experience? And with that understanding, start recognizing that every human, every individual, everything that we interact with reflects that same inherent worth.
It's not about an adventure, it's about the atmosphere of the consciousness of adventure, the lifestyle of adventure. How many people would say that their lifestyle is adventurous?
My name is Lisa Benson. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant and the author of Anchored in Bias, Fired Over White Tears. It's a book detailing my lived experiences with workplace bias and what fueled my passion for normalizing conversations about differences and creating safe spaces for everyone to bring the best version of themselves to life every day.
And we're back. You're watching Spirit Cafe show here on the New Thought Media Network, and our guest today is Rev KC of Spirit Uncensored. And Mark, you have a great question for Rev KC.
Can I say something before you ask that question?
Yes.
These commercials, the first commercial had Jesse Powers, who is our performer at Next Gen, and the other commercial about the Unity Village conference that listed James Mellon as a featured keynote speaker was my minister teacher. So it's just so funny to me that we were like talking about these things they're associated with, and there they are in the commercials.
And there they are. Yeah, James Mellon is great. That's awesome.
So you see why I wanted to take his ministerial class. You get that now, right?
Absolutely. All right, Mark, what do you got?
So before we went to break, you mentioned that my words will be you identified as Karen Frost, and now you are KC Taylor. Can you speak to that transition?
I sure can. Oklahoma had a lot to do with it. Well, actually, the Karen thing had a lot to do with it. You know, there's a term calling somebody a Karen that I don't fit. And when I lived in California, it wasn't a big deal. I think part of it has to do with timing as well. When we started having a significant conversation about race in 2020. California was shut down, and I wasn't meeting new people really. I was in kind of Zoom things, and nobody was talking about the whole Karen thing to me in that context. But once the world was opening again, and I was a new person in Oklahoma and introducing myself to people at Alibis, every time I said my name was Karen, people would talk to me about that whole thing. And I didn't want that energy every time I introduced myself. And the other part of it was I had gone by KC about 10 years ago, specifically, it's more than 10 years ago now, before I left for LA, when I was in my last year or two in Chicago. I chose to go by Casey. Cynthia's my middle name. But I really wanted to have a gender neutral name. And I hadn't spent a lot of time with what that felt for me energetically in that moment. A big part of it had to do with knowing that I was planning to move to Los Angeles. And Los Angeles in 2011 was long before the Me Too movement had started, and was just known as a place for toxic masculinity. And I thought it would be important, especially as an aspiring writer, not to have a gender neutral name. So made that decision a long time ago and stopped doing it because people couldn't figure out the difference between KC and Casey. And so I just got rid of the whole thing and, moved on with my life. And then once the Karen thing resurfaced, and didn't like that energy of it in Oklahoma, and nobody knew me here. So it's a lot easier to start with a new name in a city where no one knows you. And when I started at Sisu at the youth shelter, I'd forgotten. I just had Karen on my resume, and it wasn't a problem so much. But then we hired another case manager named Kieran. And I said, well, great. I've been looking for an excuse to go by Casey. And, that place is the kind of place where they're like, you can, the youth there change their name every other week, and we'll learn it. And, that's what it is. So it's the most accommodating place ever. And that space is actually where I was inspired to use they, them pronouns. I was the only one using cisgender pronouns on the case management team. And I was good with it. No part of me was like, this isn't working for me. But like you, she, they is something that I was sitting with for a really long time. And I realized that specifically, this is really more about Oklahoma. We'll see what happens after I leave here. As I was talking about with having conversations about what it means to be non-binary, what it means to be transgender in Oklahoma is a very political hot button issue. And I found myself advocating for non-binary people on a regular basis. And I realized that a long time ago, back when the they them conversation just started, I'd made the conscious decision not to use they them pronouns, specifically because I felt like I'd been advocating for my right to exist in so many other spaces. I didn't need to do it here too. So it was just like, I'm comfortable with she, they, but I felt as if, and I am still comfortable with she, they, but at the same time, it's important to me to normalize they, them, and being a Oklahoma City resident, being somebody that can help blaze the trail and normalize what it means to have a they, them pronoun is very important to me. And I'm finding the same thing in our movement, like the more people that are blazing the trail, helping people adjust to the language, the more we get adjusted to it, the more it no longer has to be a conversation. So if I still lived in LA, I might not be using they, them, but in Oklahoma, it feels very important to me to utilize at this time in the world right now.
That's awesome. And I love the Karen conversation. I have a member of my congregation that goes by KJ, and her name is Karen Jean. And so I was teasing them the other night going, Karen Jean is KJ and Barbara Jean is not using BJ.
Yeah, I hear that. I should say that the Taylor, I got married last year. I'm coming up to my 1 year anniversary in like a couple of days. And my wife and her son, both have the Taylor name. We've got signs all over the house that say the Taylors on it. And it felt changed my name before. And my ex kept Frost. So I liked the idea of distancing letting her keep Frost. and moving on and doing something different.
Nice, nice. I love that. I love that. That's awesome. When did you get married? What's your wedding anniversary day?
October 1st, October 2nd, not the 1st, October 2nd. My
October
wife was
2nd.
gave me side eye, mean mug from the surrender just now.
Mine's October 6th. So,
Okay.
but I'm coming up to 21 years.
All right.
Lucky
Beautiful.
number 5. Lucky number 5.
Okay, I got to plead ignorant. What's the Karen thing?
Ooh, that makes me feel
Ooh.
like this is not a Canadian thing, right?
It
Are you
is. It
Canada?
is. No, it's very much a Canadian thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
It's
plead
Mark hasn't
ignorant.
heard of it. Go ahead, KJ.
So
KC.
the basically it, fun fact, I actually have a little history from it. When I was working at Juvie, I worked with Dane Cook, who is a relatively well known comedian, and he apologized to me for starting the whole Karen thing. I didn't realize that he'd been the one who did it. He did a stand up, and it was just a stand up where he said something like, "Okay, Karen." He told me that it was based on his ex girlfriend, and so that stand up led to people just calling, someone who asked for the manager a Karen, and so it was just kind of like it became associated specifically with like nosy white women who were calling the police on black people for just being black in the world. One of the things that came up over 2020, that's why I said I feel like this magnified over 2020, was there was a man who was bird watching in Central Park, and a woman called the police on him. And it became a well-known story in the US, and there were women like this, people calling the police on black people who were for just living, for existing, for being on a wine train and laughing on the train. This group of black women got kicked off the train for laughing. And so, like, we have all of these stories in the US. And so the women who, there's a Karen haircut associated with it, that I can't think of a good example of somebody who was known as, there was a reality show star who like had the Karen haircut, but I can't think of who she is right now. But there were these like short pixie cut type bobs, and yeah, women that would ask for the manager when they didn't get what they want, or call the police on black people for simply existing. And those were not the Karens. I didn't want my name to be associated with that kind of energy and to have that conversation every time I introduce myself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
There you go. There's your.
Yep, she's the one. She was the reality show star I was talking about. Yes, that was the perfect meme to describe a Karen.
Yeah. So it's interesting how things take off. A phrase like, "Oh, you're being a Karen," or "There's a Karen." I was speaking to somebody a little while ago whose name is Karen. I can't think of who it was, and in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I wonder if it bothers them that their name is Karen. It would bother me like it did you. I would want to change it.
The energy of it didn't bother me. It was the amount of people asking me that question. You had it in your mind. That means lots of people have it in their minds a lot, and I didn't want that.
Yeah. Well, especially when we know that we're co-creating through the thinking and the belief process that we have. We create the world in which we live, the experience that we have. So, yeah, energetically wanting to change that would be a really, really good thing. What was when you started your Spirit Uncensored? Oh, Cheryl Rogers is in the house. she's listening in. We're getting her. She said, "Great discussion." The idea of Spirit Uncensored. One of the things I like is new thought on gender identity, or new thought on where did that come from?
Yeah, that's the best question ever. It's a team kind of experience. It started with in February. So what I like to do with Spirit Uncensored is for it to be a space for emerging leaders to practice ministry. And with Spirit Uncensored, I don't put any age restrictions on it. It started with emerging. My co-founder is probably 70 right now or something like that. So, but we had just both graduated ministry around the same time. He was in my ministerial class with me. So Spirit Uncensored was a place, I like to call it a spiritual playground, where people get to play church, where you get to bring your own idea of how you like, a spiritual event of some kind or a spiritual series and to do your thing. Yeah, that's David Allen Cruz right there, my co-founder. And so with New Thoughts On, one of our board members, Lucian Baker, had this idea for a conversation about dating, and we said, "What should it be called?" And just in the conversation of it, my wife came up with the New Thoughts On ... and then it was like, well, we can do this all year. It doesn't have to just be this one event. This was February because it was dating, so we can do this, keep this going. And you mentioned that you've been having a lot of success with virtual events over the course of the last year, but for me, I don't know if I'm in Oklahoma. People in Oklahoma are done with Zoom, and so I think maybe that's just because of the location where I am. I've had a much harder time getting people to show up and participate for Zoom events. So I kind of decided that that New Thoughts on Gender Identity event would be the last one. But the co-host from New Thoughts on Gender Identity, the person who came up with that, Addison Valines, that was her topic, her initiative. She actually is doing a lot of the hosting for Spirit and Spirits in Oklahoma City as well. She is planning to host a New Thoughts on Gen Z in the new year, and I'm letting her take that series and run with it. So if she wants to keep it going and have one every month, I will fully support her in that. But it's important to me as senior minister not to be doing all of the things, to create space for emerging leaders and new ministers to have that space to take leadership, and for me to provide support as opposed to doing all things, and having Spirit Uncensored kind of run in that way. So I've been quiet a little bit for Spirit Uncensored for the last couple of months while I'm getting ready for this Next Gen retreat, and hoping that Next Gen helps connect me with some of those emerging leaders who are interested in hitting the ground running and coming up with their own ideas and series to utilize the Spirit Uncensored structure.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I think that if we can get more young leaders that are willing to step out in their own voice, I think that's what's going to create success for CSL and New Thought overall. I think the challenge is that, that idea that I have to be a certain way to be a minister, I think that's a big mistake. And I think what I love about what you're doing is you're interrupting the paradigm. And that is something that's really healthy for us to move forward. So this retreat coming up, what was it? Spirit Uncensored AF. I love that. Now I heard, I don't know if this is right, but that head office was requesting AF be taken off the flyer, or do I have that wrong?
No, and I appreciate the fact that they didn't ask us to. I give everyone in home office all of the credit for doing the best they can to continue to be fully supportive. This graphic that we're looking at, Holly Sharp, the editor of Science of Mind magazine, this woman not only puts together each issue of Science of Mind magazine herself, but also is involved in doing all kinds of other things with the CSL website and publishing, and head of the department. She is the one who designed this graphic that we're looking at right now. So she takes her own personal time to be supportive of the Next Gen community. There was an expectation that there would be some protest around the fact that our theme this year is Uncensored AF, Embrace Your Fire. And home office asked the team to come up with what AF stands for. That is something else other than what it's normally known as. And the team didn't actually do it. The home office kind of came up with Awesomely Fabulous and put it on the marketing. And at first they didn't have anything, but I think somebody protested and they added that. And we were okay with it. We didn't say, no, don't, if you can't leave it without the Awesomely Fabulous, don't do it at all. We didn't say that. We conceded to, okay, if this is what you need to do for this to go out on your marketing, that's fine with us. And with every bit of pushback, home office has supported me every step of the way, and is just trying to be careful around making sure that everyone's voice is being heard and creating a space and a container for the conversation to take place, as opposed to saying who's right and who's wrong. So I feel supported without feeling as if the ministers that disagree with me are being, they're not being labeled as wrong. Their feelings are being taken into consideration, which is why this Awesomely Fabulous was added to the marketing. But there's an effort to compromise and make everyone feel supported. And I fully credit the entire home office team for all of their continued support for Next Gen and me and my ministry.
Yeah, good. I think that's one of the most important things, is that every voice can be heard. Whether we agree or not is irrelevant. Allowing for every voice to speak, every person to speak their mind, to go, but here's what I believe. And it's like, thank you for letting us know what you think, because it does have value. And it's that I'm right and you're wrong that creates such division. It's the same thing with bullying, the idea of, anti-bullying campaigns. I don't agree with that at all, because we're making somebody bad and wrong that's probably already a victim as well. And so it's like, how do we open up instead to creating conversations of this end?
What hurt me the most around it was the ministers in the field's lack of willingness to engage in conversation around how we can better support our young adult leaders. I kept trying to steer the conversation in that direction, and there was just a generalized lack of interest. Some ministers reached out to me individually, and we definitely got some financial support from some centers and some from individual contributors. So, I'm not, don't mean to imply that people in the field are not supportive of what we're doing and who we are. But I am saying outright that I am disappointed in the field's seeming disinterest in engaging in a conversation about how we can better support emerging leaders in our movement.
It's interesting that when I was looking at rebuilding our website, number one, I got rid of the CSL Starburst because it's old. And so I came up with something else. And it's interesting. I was having a conversation with some friends of my daughter. My youngest daughter's 18. And so I'm chatting with her friends going, kind of what speaks to you? And one of the things we came up with is you be you and I be me, and that creates harmony, peace, joy. And it was like, yeah, okay, let's have that as a slogan, right? That as we each find our own unique voice and live from there, that's where we begin to create a world that actually works harmoniously with everybody else. Yeah, there's our logo. Transforming our world with the emergence of the authentic self.
Casey, when you first came on, what I heard you say, my interpretation is that you stopped, you started living what you want to be in the world, what you want to see in the world. And from this conversation, I see that. Your words echo what you said that you want to do. I so appreciate that. And personally, that's how I think we change the world, is by the being and not by the placards. Causes are so important and we need to make them known. And I think it's in the being that is of great value and creating change. You're the center. I was saying to Barbara earlier, I really appreciate the values: simple, choice, faith, and gratitude.
Yes.
How simple, how profound. It's not something that you have to memorize and it becomes rote. It's a visual, something easier to refocus on and live by.
I appreciate you saying that. I need to do a better job of highlighting that as our mission statement. It was really, as I had mentioned, because my ministry went without me. I just been riding along, figuring it out, and halfway through, I would say maybe like 6 months into Spirit Uncensored, we had I don't even remember specifically what the event title was, but all of our services have always been interactive. They've had an interactive element to them. Initially, it was a hybrid in that way, where it was more of a traditional service where there was a musician and speaking, but there was always like one piece of it that was interactive to give people an opportunity to participate. Especially young adults really wanted to have that interactive element, and the older adults did not want to have that. So it was our way to kind of meet everyone's needs. Of you have an opportunity to speak up and get on the mic and ask a question, or you can sit there and passively experience it. Whatever you want to do, this is a space for both of those things, both of those experiences. And someone said, what do you believe? Like, what do you believe? What do you teach here? And I said, we teach love. Love is our religion. Love, that's my thing. And they said, well, what do you mean? Like, what does that even mean? And so I said, I really appreciate you asking that question. I'm going to be present with it for a while. And it took me some time to even come up, because I had that question of, I am guiding this spiritual community. What values do I believe that, regardless of where someone comes from, regardless of what their cultural history is, their political beliefs consists of, what can be a thing what qualities do I think would make the world a better place if people recognized and lived from these things, that is inclusive of everyone? And choice, faith, and gratitude is what came to the surface. And it started, with, let me try it. Let me say it. Is someone going to say, oh, but what about? But what about? And we've been utilizing this mission statement, this vision statement for, I don't even know if it's vision or mission. I haven't figured that out either. Been utilizing it for a couple of years now, and there has not been a single protest. No one has said, but what about this? Or I don't like that. It's been fine. So you have inspired me, Mark, to do a better job of making this clear, showing up for spirits. I've never mentioned it before, of just really leaning into and amplifying what our vision statement truly is.
I love it. I love it. Well, we're down to our last 2 minutes. So we got to wrap up here. Final thoughts, just a couple of words. What do you think are the most important thing for people to take away from this show?
Be the change. That's what it is. It takes work, but it's powerful. Not only does it transform you individually, but it transforms the world around you. Absolutely.
What about you, Mark?
What she said. What they said.
What they said.
No, I want to have a whole conversation about that. And is it okay? And it's been a pleasure, an education. I feel open. I don't feel that I needed to protect myself. And so thank you for that.
Awesome. And, on that same note, I believe love is the answer. It doesn't really matter what the question is. And so on that note, thank you, Rev KC. Thank you, Mark. You're watching the Spirit Café show on the New Thought Media Network. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And hey, send a donation to newthoughtmedia.org. It will be appreciated and well used. Bye, everybody. See you next week. Have a great one.
Thank you.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.